The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet. 300 species from across the galaxy sat in their designated seats, watching the human ambassador with confusion and growing concern. Doyen stood at the central podium, his dark suit pristine, his expression calm. He had served as Earth's voice for 20 years, and everyone in this room knew him well. They had shared meals with him, negotiated treaties with him, and trusted him to mediate their worst conflicts. "We're leaving," Doyen said simply. His voice carried through the chamber's translation matrix, reaching every being in their own language. "All of us. Every human in the galaxy is going home." The Vrin representative rose from her seat, her crystalline form shimmering with agitation. "This is absurd. What demands do you have? What concessions are you seeking?" Doyen smiled, but there was sadness in it. "No demands. No concessions. We're simply done here. Humanity is recalling every citizen, every worker, every family. Within 72 hours, we will be gone." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted questions in hundreds of languages. The Krath delegation slammed their appendages against their desk. The small Helian ambassador called for order, her gentle voice lost in the noise. Doyen waited patiently, hands folded behind his back, until the Supreme Chancellor demanded silence. "Ambassador, you cannot be serious," the Chancellor said, his ancient face troubled. "Humanity has been part of this council for 3 centuries. You've built homes on 1,000 worlds. Your people are integrated into every level of galactic society." "I am completely serious," Doyen replied. "The decision has been made. I'm simply here to inform you, as a courtesy." "But why?" the Helian ambassador asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Have we offended you? Has someone wronged humanity?" Doyen looked at her with genuine affection. "No, Minister Sheila. You and your people have been wonderful neighbors. This isn't about anger or revenge. It's simply time for us to go." He stepped down from the podium. His last act as ambassador was to place a small data chip on the Chancellor's desk. "This contains the locations of all human facilities, stations, and settlements. We're leaving everything behind in working order. Consider it a gift." Then he walked out of the chamber. He didn't look back. Across the galaxy, the exodus began immediately. On Nubuzon, a thriving colony world with gleaming cities and vast farmlands, 5 million humans began packing. Guan, the colony governor, stood on the landing pad watching transport ships arrive in endless succession. Families loaded their personal belongings, but everything else stayed behind. The houses, the schools, the hospitals, all remained pristine and empty. "Governor, the Vrin are already requesting permission to settle here," her aide said nervously. "They say if we're abandoning the planet, it should be allocated to those who need it." Guan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell them they're welcome to it. We won't be coming back." In the Andromeda sector, Engineer Myray sealed the final maintenance report on the massive Crossroads station. The station was the size of a small moon, serving as the galaxy's primary trading hub. Thousands of ships docked here daily. Hundreds of species conducted business in its vast markets. In every critical system, every power relay, every environmental control had been designed, built, and maintained by humans. "Are you sure about this?" her Krath colleague asked, his multiple eyes watching her work. "The station can't run without your people." "Sure it can," Murray said cheerfully, backing up the final diagnostics to the station's core. "Everything's automated. The AI can handle routine operations. You'll be fine. But what about repairs? Upgrades? You humans have been running this place for 200 years. Murray shouldered her bag and headed for the docking bay where her evacuation ship waited. "Then I guess it's time you learned how to do it yourselves." The evacuation was orderly, efficient, and utterly complete. Humans withdrew from every corner of the galaxy, from the outer rim colonies to the core worlds, from deep space research stations to diplomatic embassies. They all left. Some aliens watched with confusion, others with anger. A few, like Minister Sheila, watched with tears in their eyes. On Earth's moon, the last group of humans prepared to depart. These were the maintenance crews who had kept humanity's oldest installations running. They ensured every system was functioning perfectly before they left. Luna Base, which had stood for 1,000 years, was sealed and powered down to standby mode. Captain Jiwan commanded the final transport leaving the Sol system. On her view screen, Earth rotated peacefully below, blue and green and beautiful. The moon hung in the darkness nearby. Mars gleamed red in the distance. Humanity's cradle system, their first and oldest home. All ships report ready for jump, her navigator announced. We're the last ones. Jiwan took a deep breath. Any final communications from the Council? Yes, Captain. They're demanding we reconsider. They're offering trade concessions, territory grants, council seats. The Supreme Chancellor himself is requesting a meeting. Ignore them, Jiwan said firmly. Humanity has spoken. It's time to go. The fleet of ships gathered around Earth began to shimmer with exotic energies. Jump drives charged, preparing to tear holes through space itself. But this wasn't a normal jump. Every human ship activated simultaneously, their drives synchronized to a frequency only human technology could produce. Engaging the Exodus Protocol, Jiwan announced. See you on the other side. Reality bent. Space twisted. And then, in a flash of light that briefly outshone every star in the sector, humanity was gone. Not just the ships. Not just the people. The entire Sol system vanished from existence, leaving only empty space where Earth had orbited for billions of years. The Galactic Council sent probe after probe to the coordinates. Every scan showed the same thing. Nothing. No debris, no radiation, no trace that anything had ever existed there. Earth, Luna, Mars, and all the other planets were simply gone, as if they had never been. In the council chambers, the Supreme Chancellor stared at the empty star charts. For the first time in his long life, he felt genuine fear. Humanity hadn't just left the galaxy. They had erased themselves from it completely, taking their home system with them. What have we lost? Minister Shilla whispered. Nobody had an answer. But soon, they would learn the terrible price of humanity's absence. 6 months had passed since humanity disappeared, and the Galactic Council had moved on remarkably well. Or so they told themselves. The Vrin Empire had claimed New Busan and 14 other former human colonies. The Krath Dominion took ownership of the Crossroads Station and dozens of trading outposts. Smaller species divided up the research facilities, farms, and industrial complexes humanity left behind. The Vrin colonists who arrived on New Busan were amazed by what they found. The cities were immaculate, as if the humans had left just yesterday. Homes stood fully furnished, with beds made and kitchens stocked. The power plants hummed steadily, feeding energy into the grid. The farms continued their automated cycles, with crops growing in perfect rows under climate-controlled domes. It's like they wanted us to have it, one Vrin settler said. Moving into a comfortable apartment overlooking the central plaza, everything works perfectly. It did work perfectly. Too perfectly, perhaps. The fusion reactors never fluctuated. The water treatment plants operated flawlessly. The transportation network ran without a single glitch. The automated farming systems produced food in abundance. For the Vrin, it seemed like a paradise handed to them on a silver plate in the council chambers on Viridian Prime. The Supreme Chancellor addressed the assembly with confidence. The human departure, while unfortunate, has presented opportunities for expansion and growth. Their territories have been distributed fairly among member species. We are adapting well. Krath representative nodded its massive head. Indeed. The Crossroads Station continues to function admirably under our management. Trade flow is uninterrupted. But that wasn't entirely true. The Krath administrators at Crossroads were discovering small problems. Nothing major, just minor annoyances. A cargo bay door that stuck sometimes. A docking clamp that needed recalibration more often than it should. An environmental system that occasionally produced slightly incorrect humidity levels. The Krath. Engineers filed maintenance requests and waited for the human technicians to respond. Then they remembered there were no human technicians anymore. They tried to fix the problems themselves, using the detailed manuals humanity had left behind. The manuals were comprehensive, but they referenced other systems, which referenced other manuals, which referenced technologies the Krath had never fully understood. How did the humans make this look so easy? A frustrated Krath engineer muttered, staring at a wall of alien machinery that refused to cooperate. Meanwhile, the galaxy's diplomatic situation was deteriorating. For 200 years, humans had served as neutral mediators in galactic disputes. They had no territorial ambitions, no ancient grudges, no species-based prejudices. When the Vryn and Krath argued over border systems, human negotiators found compromises. When trade disputes erupted, human lawyers drafted agreements everyone could accept. Now those mediators were gone. Old tensions that humanity had kept suppressed began bubbling to the surface. The Vryn Krath border, which had been peaceful for decades, saw its first military incident in 20 years. A Vryn patrol accused a Krath vessel of crossing into their territory. The Krath denied it. Without human mediators to investigate and calm both sides, the accusations escalated into threats. "We demand the Krath withdraw from the disputed zone immediately," the Vryn representative declared in the council chambers. "The zone is not disputed. It is ours," the Krath representative replied coldly. "Perhaps if the Vryn were less aggressive, we could discuss this rationally." "Aggressive? You're the ones massing ships on our border?" "Only because you stationed warships near our colonies." The arguments grew louder and more heated. The Supreme Chancellor called for order, but his authority seemed weaker, without human voices backing his decisions. Humanity had always supported the Council's rulings, giving them weight and legitimacy. Now the Council felt hollow. Minister Shilla of the Hellion Collective tried to intervene, her peaceful nature making her a natural mediator, but she lacked the training and experience humans had possessed. Her suggestions were dismissed by both sides. She returned to her seat, frustrated and worried. On the former human colony of New Busan, a Vryn scientist named Velcros was examining the planetary databanks. Humanity had left behind vast archives of information, cultural records, entertainment files, historical documents. Velcros was fascinated by human history, trying to understand these strange beings who had walked away from everything. Deep in the databanks, he found something odd. A locked file protected by encryption he couldn't break. But the file had a timer visible on its surface. 8x7 days remaining. Remaining until what? Velcros tried every method he knew to open the file, but the human encryption was far more sophisticated than Vryn technology. All he could do was watch the timer count down. He reported his finding to the colonial administrator, who dismissed it. Probably just some human bureaucratic nonsense. They loved their schedules and timers. Don't worry about it. But Velcros did worry. He began searching other human facilities and found the same thing everywhere. Every human-built structure, every piece of human technology, every database had a countdown timer. All of them synchronized. All counting down to the same moment, now 85 days away. Trade routes across the galaxy began experiencing problems. For 300 years, humans had maintained the network of navigation beacons that guided ships through dangerous regions of space. Those beacons still functioned, but they occasionally transmitted incorrect data. A ship heading to the Andromeda sector received coordinates that put it 3 light-years off course. Another vessel found its usual safe passage now flagged as hazardous. Pilots complained to the Council. The Council tasked their own technicians with investigating. The technicians discovered that the beacons used a complex calibration system designed by human engineers. Without regular updates from Earth-based calculations, the beacons were slowly drifting out of alignment. "Can't we just recalibrate them ourselves?" the Chancellor asked. "We can try, Supreme Chancellor," the lead technician replied. "But the system was designed around human mathematical models we don't fully understand. We might make things worse." The galaxy's translation matrix, which allowed all species to communicate seamlessly, started producing errors. Minor at first, a word translated incorrectly here, a phrase misunderstood there. But these small errors led to big problems. A trade agreement was nearly cancelled because the word required was translated as suggested in Krath language. A diplomatic message from the Vryn was interpreted as an insult by the Hellion, almost causing an incident. Humans had maintained and updated the translation matrix for generations. They had studied every language in the galaxy, understanding nuances and cultural contexts that pure software couldn't grasp. Now that maintenance was gone, and the matrix was slowly degrading. Food shortages appeared on worlds that had relied on human agricultural technology. The automated farms kept producing, but yields were dropping. The Vrenon New Busan noticed their crop production down 15%, then 20%, then 30%. The systems were breaking down in ways too, subtle to fix without deep knowledge of human farming techniques. Still, the Council maintained its confident facade. "These are temporary difficulties," the Chancellor assured the Assembly. "We are a resourceful galaxy. We will adapt and overcome." But privately, some members were beginning to worry. Minister Schilla approached the Chancellor after one particularly tense session. "Supreme Chancellor, perhaps we should try to contact humanity. Ask them to return, or at least to help us maintain their systems." The Chancellor shook his head firmly. "We will not beg. The humans chose to leave. We will prove we don't need them. This council survived for 10,000 years before humanity arrived. We will survive their absence." It was a decision based on pride, not wisdom. And as the countdown timers and human facilities ticked steadily downward, the galaxy moved closer to understanding just how much they had taken humanity's presence for granted. The cracks were showing, small but growing. And soon, those cracks would become catastrophic failures. 1 year after humanity vanished, the galaxy learned what true crisis meant. The problems that seemed minor 6 months ago had grown into catastrophes. And they all arrived at once, as if coordinated by some invisible hand. The Crossroads Station was the first domino to fall. The massive trading hub had been showing signs of strain for months. But the Krath administrators kept patching problems without understanding the underlying systems. Then, on a busy trading day with thousands of ships docked and hundreds of thousands of beings aboard, the exotic matter containment fields failed. Red emergency lights flooded the central core. Alarms blared in every language. The Krath chief engineer stared at his displays in horror as containment field readings dropped toward 0. If those fields collapsed completely, the station would tear itself apart, killing everyone aboard. Hit the human technicians. Someone shouted before remembering there were no human technicians. Not anymore. The Krath engineers frantically searched through human manuals, trying to understand the complex interplay of systems. The fields stabilized just before complete failure, but large sections of the station had to be evacuated and sealed off. Crossroads, once the busiest hub in the galaxy, was now operating at 30% capacity. Trade routes that depended on the station ground to a halt. The economic impact rippled outward like a shockwave. Ships couldn't refuel. Cargo couldn't transfer. Traders lost fortunes. Entire planetary economies that relied on Crossroads trade began to suffer. And the Krath, despite their best efforts, couldn't fix what they didn't understand. On New Busan, Velcros watched the countdown timer reach 0. He had spent months trying to warn the colonial administrator, who had finally agreed to evacuate critical personnel as a precaution. The moment the timer hit 0, every human system on the planet began degrading simultaneously. The fusion reactors didn't explode. They simply became less efficient. Power output dropped 10% per day. The farms stopped producing entirely, their delicate balance of nutrients and climate control failing. Water treatment plants began releasing contaminated water. The transportation network experienced random shutdowns. It wasn't sabotage. It was planned obsolescence on a galactic scale. Velcros finally cracked one of the encrypted files. Inside was a simple message written in basic galactic common. All human technology was designed for human maintenance. Without regular upkeep by trained personnel, systems will degrade naturally. Estimated time to critical failure, 12 to 18 months from final human departure. This was not an act of malice. This was interdependence by design. He shared this discovery with the Vryn High Command, who shared it with the Council. The revelation was devastating. Humanity hadn't sabotaged anything. They had simply built systems that required their expertise to maintain. And they had been maintaining those systems for 300 years without anyone noticing how dependent the galaxy had become. The Supreme Chancellor called an emergency session. Representatives arrived to find the council chambers themselves experiencing power failures. The Great Hall that had stood for 10,000 years was failing, because human engineers had reinforced and upgraded it 200 years ago. Those upgrades were now breaking down. How many of our systems are affected? The Chancellor asked his staff. All of them, Supreme Chancellor. Every major installation in the galaxy has some human component. We estimate 60 to 70% of critical infrastructure is at risk. The numbers were staggering. Navigation beacons were failing across the galaxy, making space travel dangerous. Communication networks were breaking down, leaving worlds isolated. Medical facilities using human-designed equipment were losing functionality. Food production on dozens of worlds was collapsing, and the Vrinkrath border conflict was escalating into full war. Without human mediators, without the Crossroads Station to facilitate diplomatic meetings, without even reliable communication systems, the two powerful empires were sliding toward catastrophic violence. The Vryn accused the Krath of sabotaging navigation beacons to gain a military advantage. The Krath accused the Vryn of hoarding human technology and refusing to share knowledge. Both accusations were false, but without neutral investigators. Neither side believed the other's denials. Ships began firing on each other. Colonies were blockaded. Trade ceased between the two empires, disrupting supply chains across the galaxy. Smaller species were forced to choose sides or risk being crushed between the giants. The Helion Collective desperately tried to maintain neutrality while their economy crumbled around them. Minister Sheila stood before the council with tears streaming down her face. We must contact humanity. We must beg them to return. Pride means nothing if our civilization collapses. We don't know how to contact them, the Chancellor admitted quietly. The Sol system is gone. We have no idea where they went. We've sent probes to every corner of the galaxy and found nothing, a junior aide spoke up nervously. Supreme Chancellor, we've been receiving strange transmissions in dead zones of space. They appear to be human in origin. Bring them up immediately. The transmissions played in the chamber. They were brief audio messages, crackling with static, spoken in various human languages that the degrading translation matrix barely managed to convert. Do not follow. You are not ready. Solve your own problems first. We left because we had to. Learn what we tried to teach you. The galaxy needs to stand on its own feet. The messages were not distress calls. They were warnings. And they were maddeningly vague about humanity's location or willingness to return. They're watching us, Velcro said, having been brought to the council as an expert on human artifacts. They're monitoring our situation somehow, and they're choosing not to intervene. But why? Another representative demanded. If they can see us suffering, why won't they help? Velcros had been studying human history intensively over the past year. He had read their literature, watched their entertainment, analyzed their philosophical texts. Because helping too much was the problem? Look at us. Look at how completely we depended on them for everything. They built our stations, mediated our conflicts, maintained our infrastructure, taught our children. And what did we learn? We just took and never bothered to understand what we were receiving. The chamber fell silent. The truth was painful but undeniable. There's more, Velcros continued. I found historical records from 50 years ago. Humanity proposed a technology exchange program. They wanted to teach other species how to maintain and build the systems they were creating. The council rejected it, said it was unnecessary, that human workers were sufficient. We rejected it, Minister Sheila whispered, because we were lazy, because it was easier to let them do everything. A massive explosion echoed through the building as another power system failed. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency lighting. In the dim red glow, the Supreme Chancellor looked ancient and tired. Send every probe, every ship, every resource we have, he ordered. Find humanity. Find Earth. Find any trace of where they went. We need them back. But even as the search began, more systems failed. More conflicts erupted. More worlds fell into chaos. The galaxy was unraveling, thread by thread, as all the invisible work humanity had done became terrifyingly invisible in its absence, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity watched and waited, wondering if the galaxy would learn the lessons they had tried to teach, or if pride and arrogance would doom them all. 18 months after humanity's departure, the galaxy was desperate. The Galactic Council convened in temporary chambers after their primary building became too dangerous to occupy. Half the assembled species were actively at war with each other. A quarter were experiencing famine. All of them were terrified. The vote was unanimous for the first time in recorded history. Every species, from the mighty Vryn Empire to the smallest colony worlds, agreed. Find Earth, find humanity, bring them home. Whatever the cost, the Supreme Chancellor authorized the largest search operation in galactic history. Hundreds of ships were dispatched to every corner of known space. Advanced probes using every detection method available swept through sectors where Earth should have been. Velcro's, now appointed as the Council's chief advisor on human affairs, coordinated the search personally. We're starting with the coordinates where Sol System existed, he explained to the assembled fleet captains. From there we'll expand outward in a sphere, checking every star, every planet, every asteroid. Humanity left 12,000 colonies. They all departed toward specific jump points. We'll trace those routes backward. The first search teams returned with nothing. Empty space, where Earth had been. No debris, no radiation signatures, no gravitational anomalies. It was as if the entire star system had been cleanly removed from reality. Try gravitational wave detection, suggested a Krath scientist. If they moved an entire star system, it would have left ripples in space-time. They tried. They found nothing. Earth hadn't moved through space. It had simply ceased to exist in this reality, leaving not even a trace of its passage. The search expanded. Teams followed the routes human colony ships had taken during the Exodus. Every ship had jumped toward the same general direction before vanishing. But when search vessels tried to follow those paths, they found nothing but empty space. It's like they jumped into a different dimension, one frustrated captain reported. The coordinates they used don't lead anywhere in normal space. Velcro's had another idea. Search for ancient human artifacts, things from before they joined the Council. If we can understand their technology better, maybe we can figure out where they went. This approach yielded surprising results. On a barren world in the Outer Rim, archaeologists found a human research station that predated the Council era by 50 years. It had been abandoned long ago, but contained fascinating technology. Propulsion systems the Council had never seen. Energy sources that operated on principles alien scientists didn't recognize. Communication devices that seemed to access dimensions beyond normal space. They had this technology before they joined us, Velcro said, studying the findings with growing amazement. They didn't need our help. They chose to join the Council and share their knowledge. A Hellion archaeologist made an even more disturbing discovery. Look at these dates. Humans had faster-than-light traveled 200 years before they revealed it to the Council. They had fusion power for 300 years before they shared the designs. They deliberately held back their most advanced technology. What? Why would they do that? Minister Schilla asked. Maybe they were afraid of us, Velcro suggested. Or maybe they wanted to see if we could develop our own solutions first. The search took on new urgency. If humanity had technology the Council didn't understand, finding them would be even more difficult than anticipated. But the galaxy was running out of time. The Vrinkrath War had spread to involve 17 other species. Famine was killing millions. Infrastructure failures were accelerating. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. A maintenance worker on an abandoned asteroid station found something nobody had thought to look for. A human who hadn't left. The distress beacon was automatic. Triggered when a hibernation pod detected nearby movement. The station had been a minor refueling outpost, barely worth noticing during the Exodus. In a forgotten storage bay, a single hibernation pod hummed quietly. its occupants sleeping peacefully through the galaxy's collapse. The pod's label read, Yunho Station Maintenance Chief. The Council authorized an immediate retrieval mission. The pod was transported to Viridian Prime with extreme care, as if it contained the galaxy's last hope. In a way, it did. Velcros personally oversaw the awakening process, ensuring everything was done correctly. Yunho opened his eyes slowly, his body adjusting to consciousness after 18 months of hibernation. He was a slim man in his 30s, with tired eyes and calloused hands. The first thing he saw was a room full of alien faces staring at him with desperate hope. "What happened?" he mumbled, his voice rough from disuse. "Did I miss the evacuation?" "You did," Velcro said gently. "Everyone else left 18 months ago. You've been asleep." Yunho sat up slowly, processing this information. 18 months? But the recall order only gave us 72 hours. How did I? He looked at the hibernation pod's logs and groaned. System malfunction. The pod activated early for a routine maintenance check, and I got stuck inside. By the time I could override it manually, everyone was gone. "We need your help," Minister Sheila said, stepping forward. "The galaxy is falling apart without humanity. We need you to call them back." Yunho looked at the assembled aliens with a mixture of pity and frustration. "You still don't understand, do you?" "Understand what?" the Supreme Chancellor asked. "We understand we made mistakes. We understand we depended on humanity too much. We're ready to negotiate better terms for your return." "It's not about terms," Yunho said, climbing out of the pod on shaky legs. "It's not about negotiations or concessions or trade deals. Humanity didn't leave because we were angry or insulted. Then why?" Velcros asked quietly. Yunho walked to a window and looked out at the damaged planet below. "Take me to your council chambers. All of you. I'll explain everything, but you're not going to like the truth." The journey to the temporary council chambers gave Yunho time to learn about the galaxy's current state. Every report made him sadder. The wars, the famines, the infrastructure failures. He listened quietly, asking occasional questions, his expression growing more troubled with each answer. When they reached the chambers, packed with representatives from every species, Yunho stood at the central podium where Doyan had delivered humanity's farewell 18 months earlier. He looked at the desperate, frightened faces around him and sighed deeply. "I can send a message to humanity," he said. "I have access to communication protocols you don't. Whether they'll answer, whether they'll come back, I can't promise anything. But before I try, you need to understand why they left." "Tell us," the Chancellor said. "We're listening now." "We should have listened before." Yunho nodded slowly. "Then let me tell you about the cycle, and about the choice humanity made to survive. And maybe, if you really listen this time, you'll understand why saving yourselves is the only way to save the galaxy." The chamber fell silent. Every being hanging on his words, hoping for salvation, but fearing the truth they were about to hear. Yunho took a deep breath and began to speak. Revealing secrets humanity had tried for decades to share, secrets the Council had been too arrogant to hear. Until now, Yunho stood before the Galactic Council in the dim emergency lighting, looking at the assembled representatives with sad, knowing eyes. 2 years had passed since humanity left, and the galaxy was barely holding together. The beings who had once been so proud, so confident, now looked to a single human maintenance worker as their last hope. "You want me to call humanity back?" Yunho said quietly. "You think that will solve everything? But first, you need to understand what you're really asking for." The Supreme Chancellor leaned forward. "Then help us understand. Why did humanity leave?" Yunho pulled up a holographic display showing galactic star charts going back 50,000 years. "Humanity discovered something 15 years ago. We found ruins on a dead world in uncharted space. Ancient structures, older than any civilization in the Council. Inside those ruins were records. A warning." The chamber was silent as Yunho continued. "The galaxy goes through cycles. Every 50,000 years, there's a collapse. Not a natural disaster or an invasion. A societal collapse. Advanced civilizations grow too comfortable, too dependent on each other. They forget how to solve their own problems. And when the inevitable crisis comes, they all fall together. Minister Shilla gasped. That's why you studied our history. You were looking for the pattern. You found it, Yunho confirmed. 7 previous cycles. 7 collapsed civilizations. The ruins we discovered were from the last one. They had technology that made ours look primitive. And they fell anyway, because they forgot how to be self-sufficient. Velcro spoke up, his voice thoughtful. And the current council is approaching that same collapse point. You passed it years ago, Yunho said bluntly. Humanity tried to warn you. We proposed educational programs, technology transfers, independence initiatives. Every single proposal was rejected. Do you remember why? The Chancellor's voice was barely a whisper. We said it was unnecessary. That human workers were sufficient. Exactly. And that's when we knew. You weren't going to change? You were going to keep depending on us until the whole system collapsed, taking humanity down with you. So we made a choice. We chose to survive. By abandoning us, a Vryn representative said bitterly. By giving you a chance to save yourselves, Yunho corrected. Look at what you've accomplished in 2 years. The Crossroads station is still functioning, even at reduced capacity. You figured that out on your own? The Krath and Vryn are talking about peace negotiations instead of total war. The Helion Collective developed new agricultural methods to replace failing human systems. You're learning? Learning? Another representative shouted. We're dying. Millions have starved. Entire worlds are in ruins. Yunho's expression hardened. And that's terrible. Truly terrible. But if humanity had stayed, what would have happened? We would have fixed your problems again. And again. And again. Until the cycle completed and everyone fell together. At least this way, some might survive. Is that what you call mercy? Minister Sheila asked, tears in her eyes. Watching us suffer when you could help? It's what we call tough love, Yunho replied. My grandfather was a teacher. He used to say the hardest part of teaching isn't giving answers. It's watching students struggle with problems you know how to solve, because solving it for them means they never learn. He walked to the center of the chamber, looking up at all the representatives. Humanity didn't take our technology to hurt you. We took it because we built it to our specifications. Specifications you never bothered to learn. We maintained it because you never asked how. We mediated your conflicts because you never learned to compromise. We were your partners who became your servants, and you never even noticed. The truth settled over the chamber like a heavy weight. Many representatives looked ashamed, others angry. All were desperate. So you won't help us, the Chancellor said. You'll just let the galaxy burn. I didn't say that, Yunho replied. I said I can send a message to humanity. But before I do, we need to establish something. If they come back, what changes? Will you go back to depending on them for everything? Will you learn nothing from this crisis? What do you want from us? Velcros asked. Yunho pulled out a data chip. This contains a proposal. Independence protocols. Education requirements. Technology sharing agreements. It's the same proposal humanity made 15 years ago, the one you rejected. If you agree to these terms, I'll send the message. If you don't, I'll tell humanity you're not ready yet. We don't have time for conditions, a desperate voice called out. People are dying now. People are dying because you weren't prepared, Yunho said firmly. Because you've got comfortable. Because you thought someone else would always solve your problems. If you want that to change, you have to change first. Minister Sheila stood up. What do the protocols require? Every species must develop their own technology instead of relying on others. Critical infrastructure must have redundancy from multiple sources, not just human systems. Conflicts must be mediated by trained diplomats from neutral species, not just humanity. Educational exchanges so every civilization understands the technology they use. And most importantly, you have to help each other instead of competing for resources. The representatives looked at each other. Some nodded slowly. Others seemed resistant, but the desperation was universal. How long would implementation take? The Chancellor asked. With full effort, 5 years for basic independence, 10 years for complete self-sufficiency. And humanity won't come back until you prove you can stand on your own. That's impossible, someone protested. The galaxy won't last 5 more years. Then you'd better work together, Yunho said. Really work together for the first time. Pool your knowledge. Share your resources. Stop fighting wars and start solving problems. If you can do that, if you can prove you've learned from this crisis, humanity will help. Not as your saviors, as your equals. The debate lasted for hours. Some species wanted to reject the terms and demand immediate help. Others saw the wisdom in Yunho's proposal. Eventually, as the emergency lights flickered and another power system failed somewhere in the building, the vote was called. It passed. Not unanimously, but by a strong majority. The galaxy committed to change, to growth. To learning how to help itself, Yunho accessed a communication panel that only humans knew how to use. He entered a long encryption code and recorded a simple message. This is Yunho Station Maintenance Chief, reporting from Viridian Prime. The Council has accepted the Independence Protocols, requesting evaluation team to verify progress. We'll be waiting. He sent the message into the void, using frequencies and pathways that non-human technology couldn't detect. Then he turned to the assembled council. Now we work. I'll help you as much as I can, but the real work is yours to do. Show humanity you're serious. Show them you've changed. Will they come? Minister Sheila asked. They've been watching, Yunho said with a slight smile. Those messages you received weren't automated. There are human observers in hidden locations throughout the galaxy. They've seen everything. If you follow through on these protocols, if you really try, they'll come home. And if we fail? Velcros asked. Yunho's smile faded. Then the cycle continues. Another civilization falls. And humanity remains hidden, waiting for the next era. The years that followed were hard. The galaxy struggled to implement the independence protocols while simultaneously trying not to collapse. Wars wound down slowly as species realized they needed each other to survive. Technology sharing became common instead of rare. Educational programs were established. The Crossroads Station was repaired by a coalition of species working together. Learning human engineering principles through trial and error, Yunho worked tirelessly, teaching, advising, encouraging. He became a symbol of hope, the one human who stayed to help them learn. And slowly, painfully, the galaxy began to change. 3 years after the protocols were accepted, 50 years after humanity's departure, something amazing happened. The Crossroads Station had been fully repaired and upgraded using multi-species collaboration. The Vryn and Krath signed a lasting peace treaty, mediated by Hellion diplomats trained in human negotiation techniques. Famine ended as worlds learned to feed themselves. Infrastructure was rebuilt, this time with redundancy and understanding. That's when they came. Not an invasion fleet, but a single ship. It emerged from a jump point near Viridian Prime and transmitted a simple hailing frequency. The voice that came through was old, but warm. This is Ambassador Doyan, requesting permission to dock. We heard you were ready to meet us as equals. The galaxy welcomed humanity home, not as saviors, not as servants, but as partners and friends. Doyan, now elderly, walked into the rebuilt council chambers to find a very different galaxy than the one he'd left. The species stood together instead of apart. They had learned to help themselves. But he wasn't alone. Behind him came others. Engineers, teachers, diplomats, families, and among them, a young woman with kind eyes approached Yunho, who had waited so long for this moment. Uncle Yunho, she said, embracing him. I'm Hannah Doyan's granddaughter. We've been watching. We're so proud of what you helped them accomplish. Yunho looked around at the assembled council, at the species who had learned to stand on their own, and smiled. They did it themselves. I just reminded them they could. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Strength came not from dependence, but from the courage to help yourself and the wisdom to help others without diminishing them. And as humanity rejoined the galactic community, not as indispensable workers, but as valued friends, A new era began, an era built not on what humanity could do for the galaxy, but on what the galaxy had learned to do for itself.